One of the three stars of this movie nearly died making it, not once, 3 times. He was poisoned, almost decapitated, and dragged across the desert by a runaway horse with his hands tied behind his back. And that is only the first strange thing about the most beloved Western ever filmed. Because the bridge in that famous battle scene, it was blown to splinters by mistake before a single camera was rolling, all because one man misheard a single word. And the haunting music playing in your head right now, that lonesome howl you can hum without even trying, was written before the movie was ever shot, by a man who turned out to be the director's old schoolmate. 3 legends, 1 desert, and a production that nearly killed its own cast. Before we count it down, tell me in the comments which one is the greatest, the good, the bad, or the ugly. Pick your side and hold it, because by number 1, you'll see just how close we came to losing one of them forever. These are the good, the bad, and the ugly stories no one believed until they heard the whole thing. Let's start counting. Number 1. The star who cheated death 3 times. Start with the man who should not have survived this movie. Eli Wallach played Tuco, the ugly, the fast-talking bandit who steals the entire film out from under Clint Eastwood. He was a serious New York stage actor, trained at the famous Actors Studio. And making this picture, he nearly got himself killed, on 3 separate occasions, all of which he described years later in his own memoir, the first time he was poisoned. In the cemetery finale, the crew had treated a money bag with acid so it would split open cleanly when Tuco struck it. A careless prop man poured the leftover acid into an empty soda bottle. The exact same brand of lemon soda Wallach had been sipping between takes in the brutal heat. Wallach picked it up and took a swig. He spat it out instantly and gulped milk to stop the burning, but he filmed the rest of that day with a mouth full of blisters. The second time was worse. In the scene where Tuco is handcuffed to a corpse and lays the chain across a railroad track to let a passing train snap it, Leone asked Wallach to lift his face toward the camera to prove it was really him. What nobody noticed was that each train car had a heavy iron step jutting out nearly a foot. If Wallach had raised his head even slightly, that steel step would have taken it off. He realized it only as the train roared past inches from his skull. He refused to shoot it again. And the third time, in the hanging gag, a gunshot was meant to cut the rope around Tuco's neck. The blast spooked the horse he was sitting on, and it bolted, carrying Wallach a full mile across the desert with his hands still tied behind his back, helpless, until the animal finally tired out. Poisoned, nearly beheaded, and dragged half to death. And he still came back the next morning to make the rest of the movie. But the most dangerous moment on this entire production wasn't even aimed at an actor. It was aimed at a bridge. What happened there? Number 2. They blew up the bridge by accident. Here is the disaster that cost a fortune and nearly took Clint Eastwood's head off. The climax of the film builds toward a massive Civil War battle over a wooden bridge. A bridge 2 armies are dying for, and that means absolutely nothing. To build it, the production turned to the Spanish army, whose engineers constructed a real, solid bridge across a river in northern Spain. Then they wired it with enough explosives to obliterate it in one spectacular shot. As a thank you, Leone gave a Spanish officer the honor of pushing the detonator. The signal would be the Italian word for go. But on the radio channel, another crew member said that very word to someone else. The officer heard it, believed it was his cue, and blew the bridge sky high. There was just one problem. The cameras were not rolling. The single most expensive shot in the movie gone in a heartbeat, with nothing captured on film. Leone was reportedly so furious he fired the man responsible on the spot. The mortified officer offered to make it right, and the Spanish army rebuilt the entire bridge so it could be filmed properly. And because that bridge was so sturdy, the explosives had to be ferocious. When it finally went up on camera, real shrapnel went flying. A chunk of debris slammed into a sandbag, right beside the spot where Eastwood had been told to take cover. Both Eastwood and Wallach were so wary of the blast that they watched the wide shot from a safe hilltop, where Eastwood, the story goes, calmly practiced his golf swing. A bridge built twice, a fortune spent, and a near miss with a flying rock that could have ended Eastwood's career right there. Speaking of Eastwood, what he was paid for this movie is a story all its own. Number 3. Eastwood's salary, the Ferrari, and the feud. By the time he made this film, Clint Eastwood had figured out exactly what he was worth. This was the third movie in what fans call the Dollars trilogy, after A Fistful of Dollars and For a Few Dollars More. For that first film, an unknown television actor named Eastwood was paid just $15,000. For the second, $50,000. But for the good, the bad, and the ugly, Eastwood demanded a payday that made history. He reportedly walked away with $250,000, plus 10% of the profits in North America, plus a brand new Ferrari. That salary alone was about a quarter of the film's entire budget. But the money came with friction. Eastwood was growing frustrated. He could see that Leone cared more about sweeping spectacle than about him, and he watched his role shrink as Eli Wallach's character grew bigger and funnier, and more central with every scene. Eastwood reportedly grumbled to Leone, "In the first film I was alone. In the second, there were 2 of us, and now there are 3. He feared he was being upstaged, and he was right. He even had a private nickname for his temperamental director. Behind his back, he called Leone Yesterday Sam, after the hot-tempered little cartoon cowboy. The 2 men never made another movie together. Eastwood went home to America, became a director himself, and turned into one of the biggest stars on earth, while Leone, years later, would sniff that working with Eastwood was like directing a block of marble. 2 giants who made magic together exactly 3 times and then walked away forever. But while Eastwood was getting rich, another actor on this set had been rescued from total ruin. Who was he? Number 4. The villain who was almost finished. Look into the cold eyes of Angel Eyes, the bad, the killer in the black hat, and you are looking at a man Hollywood had already given up on. He was Lee Van Cleef, and just a few years earlier his career was over. A serious car accident had shattered his knee, and doctors reportedly told him he might never ride a horse again, which in the Western business was a death sentence. The work dried up. By the mid-1960s, Van Cleef had all but quit acting and was making a living as a painter, picking up odd jobs to get by. Then Sergio Leone came looking. Leone had loved Van Cleef's hawk-like face and hooded eyes, and he had already cast him in the second film of the trilogy as a noble, sympathetic bounty hunter. For this picture, Leone wanted to flip him completely, to take that same face and make it pure evil. As Leone put it, the idea of getting Van Cleef to play the exact opposite of his previous role began to appeal to him. The gamble worked beyond anyone's dreams. Angel Eyes became one of the most chilling villains in movie history, and Lee Van Cleef went from a forgotten man with a bad knee to an international star, spending the rest of his career as one of the most recognizable faces in westerns worldwide. One phone call from an Italian director pulled a man out of obscurity and made him a legend. But the thing that truly makes this film immortal isn't a face at all, it's a sound. And the story behind it is almost unbelievable. Number 5. The music was written before the movie. Close your eyes and you can hear it. That eerie, howling melody that sounds like a coyote calling across an empty canyon. It might be the most famous piece of music ever written for a Western. And here is what almost nobody realizes about it. It was composed before the film was even shot. The composer was Ennio Morricone, and his connection to Leone went back further than anyone guessed. The 2 men had been classmates as little boys in Rome, sitting in the same schoolroom, around the age of 8. They had lost touch for decades. When they reunited as grown men to make movies, Leone didn't even recognize his old friend until Morricone reminded him. For this film, Morricone wrote the main themes ahead of time, and by Leone's own account, the director played that music out loud on set during filming. using it to set the rhythm and the mood, letting his actors move to its pulse. That is why the images and the sound feel so perfectly fused, as if the picture were dancing to the music, instead of the other way around. That unforgettable main theme was built from a human whistle and a twanging guitar. And Morricone did something clever that most viewers feel without ever noticing. He gave each of the three lead characters his own musical instrument, a kind of signature sound, so the music itself could tell you who was on screen, even with your eyes shut. The soaring piece that plays as Tuco races through the graveyard, the one called The Ecstasy of Gold, was carried by the wordless voice of a single soprano singer. The soundtrack went on to sell in the millions. A cover version of the main theme climbed all the way to number 2 on the American charts, kept out of the top spot only by Simon and Garfunkel's Mrs. Robinson. And decades later, the heavy metal band Metallica would walk out to that graveyard music at the start of nearly every concert they played. To roaring stadiums full of people who may never have seen the film it came from. A melody written before the cameras rolled became more famous than almost any line in the movie. But on the set itself, there was a problem far less beautiful. Nobody could understand anyone. Why not? Number 6. Nobody on set spoke the same language. Imagine making one of the greatest films of all time when the cast can barely talk to each other. That was daily life on the good, the bad, and the ugly. It was an Italian production filming in Spain with an American star. Eastwood, Wallach, and Van Cleef spoke their lines in English. The Italian and Spanish supporting actors spoke in their own languages. And Sergio Leone, the man directing it all, spoke very little English at all. So how did they communicate? Leone and Eli Wallach, it turns out, mostly spoke to each other in French. A language Wallach admitted he spoke badly, and Leone spoke well enough to get by. Directions were shouted, acted out, mimed, and translated on the fly. Here's the secret that follows from all that. Almost none of the dialogue you hear in the finished film was recorded live on set. In the Italian way of filmmaking back then, the sound was added later. Every actor was dubbed in afterward, their voices laid over the silent footage. That freedom is exactly why Leone could blast Morricone's music during a take and shout instructions over it without ruining the sound. It also means that when you watch Eastwood squint and growl, you may be hearing his real voice dubbed back in much later, while the actors around him were voiced by other people entirely. A movie where everyone spoke a different language somehow became a film the whole world understood. But there's one location in this movie that took an army to build, and was then lost for almost 50 years. What was it? Number 7. The cemetery an army built and time buried. The final showdown takes place in a vast, breathtaking graveyard, a huge circle of stone with thousands of graves spiraling outward. It is one of the most striking sets in film history, and it was real. It was called Sad Hill, and it was built by the Spanish army. Around 250 soldiers were put to work on a hillside in northern Spain, and in roughly 3 days, they carved out an enormous circular cemetery, laying out more than 5,000 grave markers in perfect rings around a central stone courtyard where the final duel would be fought. Think about that. 5,000 graves, dug and arranged in 3 days, by soldiers paid just a few pesetas a day. Also, Leone could film a gunfight in a giant arena of the dead. And then, when filming ended, they simply walked away. The set was abandoned to the wind and the weather. Over the years, dirt and grass swallowed it whole, until the most famous cemetery in movie history had completely vanished beneath the ground, forgotten by everyone but a handful of devoted fans. Decades later, a group of those fans refused to let it stay buried. They formed an association, returned to that lonely hillside, and dug the cemetery back out of the earth by hand, scraping away years of soil and rebuilding the graves one by one. Their incredible labor of love became its own documentary film. An army built it, time erased it, and ordinary fans resurrected it from the dirt. But let's go back to the man who stole the whole show, because he almost turned the part down. Why? Number 8. The actor who called it a Hawaiian pizza. Eli Wallach nearly missed the role of his life. When Wallach first heard the pitch, a Western made by Italians shot in Spain, he was deeply skeptical. He reportedly joked that the whole idea sounded as ridiculous as a Hawaiian pizza, a thing that simply should not exist. He was a respected dramatic actor. This sounded like nonsense. So Leone sat him down and showed him a single sequence from his previous life. A tense, brilliant scene built around a pocket watch and a duel. Wallach watched it and changed his mind on the spot. He said yes immediately, and the partnership became one of the warmest of his career. He and Leone shared the same oddball sense of humor and adored working together. Then Wallach did something special. He took the character of Tuco and made him his own. The silver tooth, the pistol worn on a cord around his neck instead of in a holster, the desperate energy, so much of it came from Wallach's own invention. He improvised pieces of the famous gun shop scene, and he delivered the line that became the film's beating heart, that when you have to shoot, you don't talk. There's a haunting footnote to this cast, too. The grizzled bounty hunter who speaks an early version of that very line, the man with one arm, was an actor named Al Mulach. 2 years later, while making another Leone film in the same Spanish desert, Mulach took his own life, still dressed in his costume. The Old West these films celebrated could be a heavy place to live in. A part nearly refused became immortal. But you should know what this whole bloody story was really about, because Leone hid a serious message inside the spectacle. Number 9. The war hidden inside the Western. For all its gunfights and gold, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly is secretly an anti-war film. And the history underneath it is real. The movie is set during the American Civil War, out in the Southwest, where Union and Confederate forces actually clashed. But Leone wasn't interested in glory, he was interested in waste. The whole reason our 3 anti-heroes keep crossing paths with the army is that the war is grinding on around them, pointless and endless, killing thousands for nothing. That bridge battle is the clearest example. 2 exhausted armies slaughter each other again and again over a single bridge that, as one weary captain explains, has no real value to anyone. When Eastwood's character finally blows it up, so both sides will stop dying for it. Leone is making a statement about the stupidity of war itself. There's a darker thread, too. The grim prison camp in the film, where soldiers are starved and beaten while a band plays music to cover the screams, was modeled on real Civil War prison camps, where tens of thousands of men actually died of disease and starvation. Leone studied real wartime photographs, the haunting black and white images from that conflict, and recreated them shot for shot. He once said he had read that more than 100,000 people died in camps like those. A movie people remember for a 3-way gunfight was quietly telling them that war is a meaningless meat grinder, which makes what happened to this film's reputation the most satisfying twist of all. Number 10. The masterpiece the critics hated. Here is the final thing nobody believed. When this movie came out, the so-called experts despised it. Major American critics savaged it. One of the most famous reviewers in the country dismissed the entire genre of these Italian westerns as cheap and repellent. Another simply called the film stupid. To the respectable critics of the late 1960s, a violent western made by Italians could not possibly be art. It was junk, and they said so loudly. The audience disagreed. The film was a massive hit around the world, eventually grossing many times its modest budget and turning Clint Eastwood into a global superstar. And here's a small irony the critics never even caught. The title itself is scrambled. In the original Italian, the movie is not called The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly at all. It is called The Good, the Ugly, the Bad, putting Wallach's character ahead of Van Cleef's. The famous English title we all know actually reshuffled the order, almost as if the world instinctively knew which name belonged last. And slowly, over the years, the experts came crawling back. The legendary critic Roger Ebert, who had given it a lukewarm review at first, later confessed his mistake in print, admitting he had described a 4-star movie but only awarded it 3 stars, simply because he couldn't believe a spaghetti western was allowed to be great art. He went back and crowned it a masterpiece. Today, one of the most celebrated directors alive calls it the single greatest achievement in the history of cinema, and the United States government officially preserved it as a national treasure. Remember how we started, with a star who nearly died 3 times, a bridge blown up by mistake, and music written before a frame was shot? That is the price they paid for this so-called piece of junk. A poisoned actor, a rebuilt bridge, a buried cemetery, and a melody that outlived them all, poured into a movie the critics threw away and history refused to forget. So you tell me, after everything you just heard, was it worth it? Drop your pick down in the comments, the good, the bad, or the ugly. And if you love the real stories behind the westerns you grew up with, subscribe to the channel. Because the truth behind these classics is always wilder than the movies themselves.